Learning Kabbalah. This is a big polemic and also a big dilemma, and there's many questions on who, what, where, when, how. And we will try also to give Rebbe Nachman's perspective on this. First of all, basically, when talking about learning Kabbalah and the fear and the prohibition and the problems, it's specifically learning the text inside. In other words, actually opening the writings of the Arizal and to start learning inside the texts, like on a schedule for beginning the book and going into it, etc. And it's more of a problem, if you want to call it, in regards to the Kabbalah books of the masters of Kabbalah, such as the Arizal, as opposed to the Zohar, which is less of a problem, since anyways the Zohar itself stressed endlessly, especially by Rebbe Nachman, just saying the words of the Zohar, the Holy Zohar. Even if you don't understand what you're saying, they have a very special spiritual power of purification, which is why, for example, in the month of Elul, there's the custom to recite the Tikkunei Zohar by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Even if you don't understand a thing what you're saying, just saying the words itself activates purity and holiness and fear of heaven, all these gifts, you name it. So it's more on the Kabbalistic texts of the Arizal, who's the main master of the Kabbalah that we know, and the break-offs, extensions explaining those writings, such as the works of the Rashash, the works of the Leshem Shevo Ve'achlama, and all the deep commentaries on the Zohar. So now, with that said, there's basically two opinions about learning Kabbalah. There's the first one brought down by the Ramo in the Code of Jewish Law, in the Shulchan Aruch, where he issues a ruling that only from the age of 40 is a man fit to learn Kabbalah. And it's based on the assumption that this man is not someone who is an ignoramus and he goes straight jump into Kabbalah. I'm 40, I can learn. He's referring to a man who's obviously well established in the other areas of the Torah. At the age of 40, he can consider starting learning Kabbalah. As opposed to the Ramak, Rav Moshe Cordovero, he brings a different opinion, where if a person is already fit, he can learn even before the age of 40. What's called being fit according to the Ramak? It's number one, being married. Number two, having vast knowledge in the Code of Jewish Law, Torah law, to be fluent in the Code of Jewish Law. And number three, to have Yirat Shamayim, fear of heaven, which a person has to be very, very, very honest with himself if he is ready for that. But these are the two opinions of starting to learn Kabbalah. Rebbe Nachman adds, and Rav Nosson explains it in the book Tzadik Chai Moharan, that one has to really, really be ready to learn Kabbalah. Because Rebbe Nachman warns that the word for Kabbalah has the same gematria, numerical value, as niuf, immorality. And that if a person is not ready to learn Kabbalah, then it can, God forbid, damage him even more. That's the whole, by the way, that's the whole fear, that's the whole prohibition, why they warned against learning Kabbalah if you're not ready, because not only will it not enlighten a person, it'll bring him more corruption, more darkness, more problems. He has to make sure he's ready. In the words of Rav Nosson, a person has to daven very much to see that if he is really truly ready to learn Kabbalah. But those who are fit, it for sure is a great mitzvah. Rabbi Nachman brings a story that there was a man who wasn't necessarily his follower, but the man hired a tutor for his son to teach his son Torah, and this tutor was a follower of Rebbe Nachman. And the man that the tutor was working for, he was known to be a very angry man. He was very aggressive, very tough with his servants. It looks like he had money if he had servants, and his workers. And he also learned Kabbalah. And the tutor, when he would come back to Rebbe Nachman to give a report, like a chassid does with the Rebbes, and he told Rebbe Nachman that this man is someone angry, aggressive, because he asked him, how you doing, what's with your parnasa, etc. And he had to tell him that he's working for a man, he's a bit tough, and he learns Kabbalah. And then Rebbe Nachman revealed this man is not fit to learn Kabbalah, right? And the story goes on that he once came to visit this town where this man lived, and the man was very excited to invite Rebbe Nachman into his house. And Rebbe Nachman came in and he saw a book on a very high shelf of Kabbalah. And he said that idea then, that this man is not fit to learn Kabbalah. And then he said something which shook the man and got him out of space. He said, why was Er, the son of Judah had two sons, Er and Onan. Er was punished, right? Because he did not want to impregnate his wife Tamar, so he spilled his seed. He had relations with her, but he spilled the seed in vain. And he was killed, he was smitten. And Rebbe Nachman said, why is he called Er? Because such a person who does such a sin is always Ra, is always bad. The letters Er, Ayin, Resh, when spelled backwards, is Resh, Ayin, bad. And Ra is associated with somebody who is sexually immoral, specifically spilling the seed in vain. So he said this in front of, Rebbe Nachman said this in the presence of the man who was the angry homeowner, who hired the tutor, Rebbe Nachman's disciple. He heard this. The man who was aggressive in learning Kabbalah, he heard this, and he shook, and he was broken totally, and he came to confess in front of Rebbe Nachman. He came bent, and Rebbe Nachman says, you should not learn Kabbalah. And the man was totally broken. And this is when Rebbe Nachman revealed this idea of the danger of learning Kabbalah, especially if a man sees that he has immoral tendencies. He has to steer clear away, because it can cause even further damage. As opposed to thinking, no, that learning Kabbalah will purify me in this. It's true, but you have to have a foundation of fear of heaven and a level of purity, which is a strong foundation established to then be able to learn Kabbalah. And until then, a person has to do a lot of davening. Now this is opposed to when Hasidic teachings, especially Rebbe Nachman and the Likutei Moharan, where they quote from the Kabbalah, and in order to understand what Rebbe Nachman is trying to teach, for example, you need to have some basics in Kabbalistic teachings in order to understand what Rebbe Nachman is saying. On that does not apply the prohibition of learning Kabbalah, because you're not learning Kabbalah for the Kabbalah learning. You're learning the Kabbalah to understand another teaching which is very powerful, called Chassidut, which the power of the Hasidic teachings is that they take teachings of the Kabbalah, and possibly, it's hard to say this, but I will say this, even what's above the Kabbalah, and bring it down to the layman, to the average person, to understand it on a practical level. When learning Kabbalah, to understand ideas for the sake of learning these teachings of the Chassidut, there it's a mitzvah, because your intent is not just to learn a Kabbalistic text for the sake of learning Kabbalah, which a person can have ulterior motives in doing so. Rather, the person's interested in understanding the Kabbalistic concepts as an introduction for learning the Hasidic teachings, where there it's a mitzvah to understand these Kabbalistic ideas, and there does not apply the worry or the prohibition of the polemic of the problem of learning Kabbalah.